The parking lot behind Iron Forge Gym was almost empty when Arthur stopped beside his truck and looked at me like he had been trying to say something for the last 10 minutes. The gym lights spilled across the pavement behind him, catching the edges of his dark hair and the sleeves of the hoodie he always wore after a workout. He had one hand resting on the open truck door, but he wasn't getting in. He kept looking at me, then at the ground, then back at me. Arthur was not a man who struggled to lift heavy things. He struggled to say simple things. Finally, he exhaled. "I think I just keep looking for reasons to see you." I went completely still. For a second, I honestly wondered if I had heard him wrong. Arthur looked almost embarrassed by his own sentence, like he had accidentally let something slip before he had figured out how to explain it. And then he stopped. No confession, no invitation, no explanation of what he wanted from me. Just that one sentence hanging between us in the cool night air. 3 months earlier, Arthur barely spoke to me. When I first started my new job, I was spending close to 10 hours a day at a computer, learning systems, answering emails, and trying not to look completely lost in meetings. By the time I got home, I wanted food, a shower, and a bed. The last thing I wanted was another obligation. So I joined Iron Forge Gym with a very simple plan. Put on my headphones, finish my workout, and go home. That plan lasted 4 days. On the 5th day, I was standing near the dumbbell rack trying to figure out whether I was using the right weight when a guy beside me said, "You're going to hate yourself tomorrow if you keep doing that." I looked over. He was tall, quiet, and wearing a faded black t-shirt with absolutely no interest in making conversation. "Good to know," I said. He nodded once and went back to his workout. That was Arthur Bennett. No introduction, no small talk, no attempt to turn a random gym interaction into a friendship. I figured that was probably for the best. I had enough people in my life asking what I did for work, where I lived, and whether I had adjusted to the city yet. Arthur seemed perfectly comfortable letting silence exist. Over the next few days, we kept ending up in the same part of the gym. Sometimes we'd exchange a quick nod. Once, he pointed out that I had left my water bottle on a bench. Another time, he moved his gym bag so I could use the outlet near the wall. None of it meant anything. At least, that's what I thought. Arthur seemed like the kind of person who noticed things without caring enough to comment on them. And I had no reason to believe I was any different from anyone else he passed between the squat racks and treadmills. At first, Arthur barely noticed me. 3 weeks later, he started noticing things about me that even I didn't notice. Arthur Bennett was 24, a mechanical engineer, 6 feet 3 inches tall, and somehow capable of making 5 minutes early feel like a personality trait. He arrived at Iron Forge Gym at the same time almost every morning, usually 5 minutes before me, carrying the same black shaker bottle in one hand and wearing the same focused expression that suggested he had already organized the next 2 hours of his life. His routine barely changed. Warm up, lift, rest, track the numbers, clean the equipment, leave. Arthur did not wander around looking for conversation. He did not introduce himself to people he did not know. He did not stop between sets to check what everyone else was doing. He simply trained. And somehow, without either of us making a decision about it, we became gym partners. It started with small things. I would finish one set, and Arthur would already be standing nearby, waiting for the bench. He would glance at my form and say, "Your elbows are flaring." I would adjust them. A few minutes later, he would say, "Do not rush the negative." That was basically Arthur's version of a full conversation. If I managed a weight I had struggled with the week before, he might give me one brief nod and say, "You are stronger than you think." Then he would pick up his black shaker bottle and go back to his own routine. I started getting used to him. More importantly, I started expecting him. If Arthur was not there, the gym felt strangely different. But Arthur never seemed particularly interested in anyone else. One morning, a guy beside us asked Arthur whether he could help him adjust a machine. Arthur gave him a quick explanation, pointed at the settings, and went back to his workout. Another day, someone tried making conversation with him for almost 5 minutes. Arthur answered politely, but the moment the conversation ended, he returned to his headphones and his routine. With me, though, he remembered things. I mentioned once that my right shoulder felt tight after long days at my desk. 2 days later, Arthur moved our warm-up around without explaining why. When I asked, he said, "You said your shoulder was bothering you." I stared at him for a second. "You remember that?" He looked genuinely confused by the question. "Yeah." Then he started counting my reps. It was not romantic. At least, I did not think it was. Arthur was disciplined. Arthur was observant. Arthur probably remembered everything. That explanation worked for me until one Thursday morning when I walked into Iron Forge feeling exhausted. I had spent most of the previous week staying late at work, staring at engineering drawings until my eyes felt dry, and I had barely been sleeping. I thought I was hiding it well. I was halfway through my second set when Arthur looked over. He waited until I finished, then said, "You have been looking tired." I laughed because it sounded so obvious once he said it. "You noticed?" Arthur tightened the cap on his black shaker bottle and looked at me for half a second. I noticed things. Then he turned back toward the weights as if he had said nothing unusual at all. But I stood there wondering what exactly he had been noticing. Because Arthur did not seem to notice everyone. He noticed me. The next few weeks at Iron Forge settled into an easy rhythm. Arthur and I trained together without ever officially deciding that we were gym partners. We just were. Then one Saturday, someone taped a sign to the front desk announcing a strength challenge. Nothing serious, just a friendly competition between members, with a few different lifts and a scoreboard near the entrance. I almost ignored it until Arthur looked at the sign, then looked at me. "You doing it?" I laughed. "Are you?" He gave me that familiar 1-second nod. "Yeah." So I signed up. The challenge gave our workouts a different energy. We started keeping track of numbers more carefully, comparing progress, pushing ourselves a little harder. Arthur never became loud or competitive in the way some people did. He stayed calm, corrected my form when I needed it, and occasionally gave me that tiny approving nod whenever I hit a number I had been chasing. But during the final event, something changed. I finished my last set, stepped back, and looked at Arthur. He had his hands on his hips, breathing hard. And then, completely unexpectedly, he laughed. Not the polite half-smile I had seen once or twice. An actual laugh. His whole face changed. I stared at him because I had never seen Arthur look that relaxed. "What?" he asked. "Nothing. I have just never seen you laugh like that." His smile lingered for another second. Then he looked at me and said, "I am glad you joined this gym." It was such a small sentence. Almost nothing. But coming from Arthur, it landed differently. This was the same man who rarely spoke unless there was a reason. The same man who arrived 5 minutes early, carried the same black shaker bottle, followed the same routine, and seemed perfectly content keeping most people at arm's length. So I smiled and said, "I am glad I joined too." We finished cleaning up and headed outside. I thought that was the end of the evening. Arthur had already reached his truck when he suddenly stopped. "Wait." He looked toward the gym. "I forgot my headphones." "You want me to wait?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah." Then he walked back inside. I stood beside my car checking my phone, expecting him to be gone for a minute or two. 5 minutes passed. Then 8. Then 10. Finally, Arthur came back through the doors. He looked exactly the same as when he left. Calm. Focused. Black shaker bottle in one hand. I noticed something sticking out of the open pocket of his gym bag. His headphones. I looked at them. Then I looked at him. Arthur followed my eyes. For a moment, neither of us said anything. He did not explain. I did not ask. Maybe he really had forgotten them. Maybe he had been distracted. Maybe he had picked them up and somehow put them right back into the same pocket without realizing they had already been there. Or maybe he had simply needed another 10 minutes before the night ended. I still did not know. Arthur closed the truck door and looked at me. "You hungry?" It was such an ordinary question that I almost laughed. "Actually, yeah." He nodded toward the road. "There is a burger place a few minutes from here." So we went. I expected a quick meal, maybe 30 minutes, 40 at most. Instead, we stayed for almost 3 hours. We talked about work. We talked about the gym. We argued about which burgers were overrated. Arthur told me about growing up with 2 brothers. I told him things I had not planned on telling anyone I had met since starting my new job. Every time I thought we were finished, another conversation started. Eventually, I checked the time and realized how late it had gotten. Arthur did not seem in any hurry to leave. Neither did I. And somewhere between the empty basket of fries and the second round of drinks, I realized something had changed. That was the first night I wondered if Arthur was looking for reasons not to go home. The Saturday after our 3-hour burger dinner, I expected things with Arthur to settle back into their usual rhythm. They did not. Not in any dramatic way. Nothing suddenly changed between us. Arthur was still Arthur. He still arrived 5 minutes early, still carried the same black shaker bottle, still followed his routine like he had written it down somewhere. But now there were these tiny things I started noticing. The first was that Arthur had started waiting for me. One morning, I walked into Iron Forge 8 minutes late and found him standing outside near his truck instead of already inside. "You were late," he said. I checked my phone. "By 8 minutes. Arthur nodded. "Exactly. You waited? I was already here." That was technically true. He just did not explain why he had stayed outside. Then there was the rep thing. I would be halfway through a set, lose count, and Arthur would quietly tell me the number before I asked. 7. I would stare at him. I thought that was 6. It was 7. He was always right. Somehow, Arthur remembered my numbers better than I did. Then one morning, before I even reached the water fountain, I saw him refill my bottle. I stopped beside the bench. "Did you just refill my water?" Arthur put the cap back on. "You were almost out. I can refill my own water." "I know." Then he handed it to me. I had no answer for that. A few days later, I was working with a weight I had struggled with when we first started training together. Arthur watched the set without saying anything. When I finished, he glanced at the plates and said, "You used to struggle with that." "I know. You are making it look easy now." I smiled. Was that a compliment? Arthur picked up his shaker bottle. "Do not get used to it." I laughed. It was becoming a pattern. He noticed everything. The strange part was that I started noticing him noticing me. One morning, I showed up wearing a new pair of training shoes. I had not mentioned buying them. Arthur looked down once. "New shoes." I stopped. "How did you notice that?" He shrugged. "They are different." Later that same workout, I changed the way I placed my feet during one of our exercises. Arthur immediately looked over. "You changed your stance." "A little." "Why?" "I thought it felt more stable." He nodded. "It does." I stared at him. "You literally never look at anyone else." Arthur said nothing. Not even a joke. He just picked up his weights and continued his set. Cut. A week later, Arthur asked if I wanted to go hiking. It surprised me because I had never heard him suggest anything outside the gym before. We met early Saturday morning, and when I got into his truck, I noticed 2 coffees sitting in the cup holders. Mine was exactly how I liked it. Then I noticed the playlist already running through the speakers. "You made a playlist?" Arthur kept his eyes on the road. "Yeah." I scrolled through the songs. "You plan conversations too?" Arthur glanced at me. "What? You have coffee. You have music. You picked the trail. Did you plan what we were going to talk about?" For the first time, Arthur looked almost caught off guard. Then he said quietly, "I hoped we would have them." That sentence stayed with me for most of the hike. We talked more than I expected. Work, family, the city, the things we wanted to do someday if we ever had enough time. Arthur was still quiet, but with me, his silence felt different. It did not feel like a wall anymore. By the time we reached the lake, we were both tired enough to sit on a fallen log and just watch the water. I asked how often he came out there. "Usually by myself." I looked at him. "Really?" He nodded. "I like the quiet." I glanced around at the trail, the trees, the water, and then back at him. "What changed?" Arthur looked at me for a long moment. Then he gave the smallest smile. "I guess I found someone I do not mind sharing it with." The weekend after our hike, Arthur invited me to his company softball event. He made it sound casual, like he was mentioning something that happened to be on his schedule. "We have a softball game Saturday. You play?" "Sometimes." Then he looked at me. "You should come." I assumed he meant as a friend. That was the easiest explanation, and by then I had become very good at choosing the easiest explanation whenever Arthur did something that made me pause. So Saturday afternoon, I showed up at a city park wearing jeans and a hoodie, expecting to sit on the sidelines for an hour or two while Arthur played with his coworkers. Instead, the moment we walked toward the group, one of the guys near the picnic tables looked up and grinned. "You must be Albert." I smiled. "That obvious?" "Not really. We have heard a lot about you." I glanced at Arthur. He stopped walking. I looked back at the guy. "You have." That was when the entire table seemed to wake up. "Arthur talks about you all the time." Arthur closed his eyes for half a second. "Marcus." "What?" Marcus looked completely innocent. "You told us about him." A woman sitting beside him pointed at me. "You are the gym partner." I looked at Arthur again. His expression had changed. Not dramatically. Arthur was incapable of dramatic embarrassment. But his ears were turning red. "Gym partner." I repeated. "Apparently, you are a very important gym partner," Marcus said. "He said you finally hit 200 pounds on that lift." I stared at Arthur. "You told them that?" Arthur looked toward the softball field. "We should probably get started." Nobody moved. He also told us you recommended that burger place, another coworker said, and that you were the reason he started watching that show everyone keeps talking about. I mentioned a show, Arthur said. You said Albert recommended it, someone else added. And you watched 3 seasons in 4 days. I could not stop smiling. Arthur. He looked at me. What? You talk about me this much? No, the answer came too quickly. Everyone at the table laughed. Arthur looked genuinely betrayed by the concept of friendship. Marcus leaned toward me. He talks about you constantly. I do not. You told us Albert hates cilantro. Arthur stared at him. Why would you know that? Because you told us. I folded my arms. Arthur, did you really tell your coworkers that I hate cilantro? He rubbed one hand over the back of his neck. It came up. How does cilantro come up in a conversation about your gym partner? It was relevant. To what? Arthur had no answer. Someone across the table started laughing. Another coworker added, he also knows your coffee order. Everybody knows my coffee order, Arthur said. I looked at him. Do they? Silence. Arthur looked away. I was starting to understand why he had been so quiet when we arrived. He had probably known exactly what was going to happen. And somehow, that made it even funnier. During the game, every few minutes someone would casually mention something Arthur had apparently told them about me. My new shoes. The hike. The burger place. The movie I had recommended. The fact that I had been working late. Each detail was harmless by itself. Together, they created a picture I was not quite ready to look at directly. Arthur noticed my expression from across the field. After the game, he walked over. You are enjoying this. Very much. They exaggerate. Did you tell them about my shoes? Arthur paused. Maybe. The shoes I bought 3 weeks ago? They are noticeable. I laughed. On the drive home, the teasing finally caught up with me. Arthur drove with both hands on the steering wheel, his black shaker bottle sitting in the cup holder between us. I watched the road for a while before asking, why do you talk about me so much? Arthur went quiet. Not his normal quiet. This was different. He thought about the question. His fingers shifted slightly on the steering wheel. I do not know. You just spent an entire afternoon being exposed by your coworkers. They were exaggerating. Arthur. He sighed. Okay. Another few seconds passed. Then he said, I guess I like talking about people I enjoy spending time with. I turned toward him. Arthur kept his eyes on the road. That answer should have made things obvious. Somehow, I still was not sure what it meant. By the time my birthday came around, I had almost forgotten that I had mentioned it to Arthur. I had said it once, nearly 2 months earlier, during one of those long conversations that seemed to happen without either of us planning them. We had been sitting in his truck after the gym, talking about work, and I had casually mentioned that my birthday was coming up. Arthur had asked when. I told him. Then we moved on to another subject. I never thought about it again. So when Arthur texted me that Saturday morning and told me to meet him at the baseball field, I assumed we were going to grab lunch afterward. Instead, when I walked onto the field, I stopped. My parents were there. Arthur's parents were there too. And Arthur was standing beside a folding table with 2 pizza boxes, a chocolate cake, and the most uncomfortable expression I had ever seen on his face. Happy birthday, he said. I looked around. What is this? Your birthday. I know that. I mean, what is all this? Arthur looked toward his parents as if they might rescue him. They did not. His mother was smiling. My mother was already laughing. You told him you wanted something small, my mom said. I looked at Arthur. I told you that. Not exactly. Then how did you know? Arthur shrugged. You said you did not like big birthday things. I stared at him. That was true. I hated being the center of attention. I hated expensive restaurants where everyone dressed like they were trying to impress someone. I like pizza. I like baseball. I like chocolate cake. And somehow Arthur had put all of that together without turning it into something complicated. There was no fancy venue, no giant reservation, no expensive gift sitting in a box, just a baseball field, pizza, chocolate cake, and the people I actually wanted around me. I looked at the cake. You remembered the chocolate? Arthur nodded. You mentioned it once. 2 months ago. Yeah. Before I could say anything else, his mother laughed. You should have seen him for the last 2 weeks. Arthur immediately looked at her. Mom. What? She looked at me. He was so nervous. I was not nervous. You asked me 6 times if chocolate cake was okay. I turned toward Arthur. 6. His mother continued, apparently enjoying herself. Then he changed the pizza order 3 times. There were different sizes. You changed it 3 times. My dad laughed. Arthur looked like he wanted the baseball field to open up and swallow him. I could not stop smiling. Why were you so worried about it? I asked. Arthur went quiet. His mother stopped smiling and looked between us. My parents suddenly became very interested in the pizza. Arthur stared at the ground for a moment, then finally looked at me. Because I wanted it to be right. Why? I asked. His expression softened. When something good happens to you, I want to be part of it. I did not know what to say. Arthur had spent months showing me that he remembered things. My coffee order, my training numbers, my shoes, my schedule. Little details I assumed disappeared the moment I said them. But this was different. He had remembered something I had mentioned once, then quietly built an entire afternoon around it. He had even called my mother. I found that out later, when she told me Arthur had asked what kind of birthday I would actually enjoy. He had not asked what would impress me. He had asked what would make me happy. And that distinction stayed with me. We ate pizza on paper plates while our parents argued about which baseball team was having the better season. Arthur sat beside me, mostly quiet, occasionally passing me another slice before I asked. When the cake came out, his mother whispered, "Finally, he can stop worrying about the chocolate." Arthur heard her. I was not worried. I looked at him. "You asked 6 times. He gave me a look. "Eat your cake, Albert." I smiled and took a bite. It was exactly what I liked. And for the first time, I wondered whether Arthur's attention to me had stopped being something I could explain away as simple observation. After my birthday, something about Arthur became harder to explain. He started texting me first. Not often enough to make it obvious, but often enough that I noticed. A message in the morning asking if I was going to the gym. A question about work. One afternoon, simply lunch. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering yes. We ended up at a small sandwich place near my office, and somehow lunch became 2 hours of talking. I told him about the architecture projects I had been getting interested in, the way older buildings were designed, and why I liked figuring out how a space could feel completely different depending on the light and layout. Arthur barely interrupted. He just listened. Eventually I laughed and asked, "Are you even interested in this?" He looked at me. "You get excited." That was his entire explanation. I looked down at my drink because I suddenly did not know what to do with that sentence. Arthur did not seem embarrassed. He simply kept listening. Later that week, a storm rolled over the city just as we were leaving the gym. Rain came down so hard that the parking lot disappeared behind a sheet of gray water. Arthur looked toward the sky, then at me. "You should not drive in this." "I will be fine." "Probably." He paused. "But you should not." I laughed. Somehow, that turned into Arthur coming back to my apartment with me. We ordered food, changed into comfortable clothes, and put on a movie. Then another. Then another. Hours passed without either of us mentioning the time. Arthur sat on the opposite end of the couch, quiet as usual, but he never seemed eager to leave. At some point, I looked over and realized he was watching the movie without really paying attention. "You tired?" I asked. "A little." "You can stay." Arthur looked at me. "Okay." He stayed. Nothing dramatic happened. We watched movies until both of us were too tired to keep talking, and sometime after midnight, Arthur fell asleep on the couch. The next morning, while rain still tapped against the windows, we were sitting in my kitchen when Arthur suddenly said, "You know what is weird?" "What?" He looked down at his coffee. "Whenever something happens, my first thought is usually, I should tell Albert." I smiled. "You are usually the first person I think about telling, too." Arthur looked at me then, and something quiet passed between us. Not a confession, not an answer, just recognition. A little later, I opened the refrigerator and noticed Arthur looking inside. "What are you doing?" "You are almost out of milk." I glanced at the carton. There was barely enough left for 1 glass. "I know." Arthur picked up his jacket. "I will be back." "Where are you going?" "Store." Before I could stop him, he was gone. 15 minutes later, Arthur walked back into my apartment carrying a new carton of milk in a small paper bag. I looked inside. Coffee creamer. The exact kind I bought. I started laughing. "You really cannot help taking care of people, can you?" Arthur set the bag on the counter. "I do not usually." I looked at him. "No." Arthur met my eyes. There was no joke in his expression this time. "Just you." And somehow, that was the sentence I could not explain away. Back at Iron Forge, things felt different after that morning at my apartment. I could not quite explain why, but every small interaction with Arthur seemed to carry more weight than it had before. We still trained the same way. Arthur still arrived 5 minutes early with his black shaker bottle, still counted my reps, still corrected my form with the same calm voice. But now I was paying attention to everything. Apparently, so was everyone else. One afternoon, while Arthur and I were finishing a set, one of the guys nearby looked between us and laughed. "You two spend more time together than married couples." I nearly dropped my water bottle. Arthur actually laughed. A real laugh, quiet, but unmistakable. Then he looked down and became strangely silent. I expected him to make one of his dry comments or tell the guy to mind his own business. He did neither. Instead, after a few seconds, Arthur turned toward me. "Does that bother you?" I blinked. "What? Spending this much time together?" His voice was quieter now. I looked at him, suddenly aware that this was not really about the joke. "No," I said. "I like spending time with you." Arthur held my gaze. "So do I." He paused. Then he added, "More than anyone." Something inside me went completely still. There it was. Not a confession exactly, but not something I could casually explain away anymore. Arthur did not say things like that. Not to me. Not to anyone. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Arthur looked almost as uncertain as I felt. So I reached for my water bottle and pretended I needed a drink. We finished the workout without talking about it. But the silence between us had changed. When we finally walked outside, Arthur stopped beside his truck. The parking lot was quiet, the evening air cool enough that I pulled my hoodie tighter around myself. Arthur rested one hand against the truck door and stared toward the gym. "I have been thinking about something," he said. "That sounds serious." "It is." I waited. Arthur looked at me. "About us." My heart started beating faster. "Okay." He took a breath. "I keep thinking about all the things we have done together." I smiled nervously. "That is a long list." "Hiking. Right. Dinner. The burger place. Movies. Several movies. Lunch. A lot of lunch." Arthur almost smiled. Then he said, "Your birthday." I stopped smiling. "Arthur." He looked down for a moment. "I have been trying to figure out why I keep doing it." "Doing what?" He looked back at me. For once, Arthur did not have an immediate answer. He seemed to be choosing every word carefully, like he knew that whatever came next might change something between us. Finally, he said, "I think I just keep looking for reasons to see you." And suddenly, I was back there. The empty parking lot. Arthur beside his truck. That same uncertain expression. That same sentence I had been trying not to understand. Only now, after the hikes and dinners and movies, after the birthday and the coffee and all the little things he remembered, I finally understood why that sentence had felt so impossible to dismiss. The next thing I did was step closer. Arthur stayed beside his truck, watching me with that same uncertain expression I had seen months earlier, except now I knew there was something behind it. "You do not need reasons," I said. Arthur frowned slightly. "For what?" "For seeing me." He looked at me like he was trying to understand the sentence. So I explained. "If you want coffee, just ask. If you want to go hiking, just ask. If you want lunch, ask. If you want to watch a movie, ask. If you want company, call me." Arthur was quiet. I smiled. "You do not have to invent some reason to make it sound accidental." He looked down at the pavement, then back at me. For once, there was no dry comment waiting behind his silence. "I have never had someone become this important to me," he said. The words were quiet, but they did not feel uncertain. I stopped smiling. Arthur continued before I could answer. "I have been trying to convince myself we are just really good friends." He gave a small, almost embarrassed laugh. "I do not think that is working anymore." That was the confession. Not dramatic. Not rehearsed. Just Arthur finally admitting what all those small moments had been saying for months. He took a breath. "I would like to take you on an actual date." I looked at him and felt the strange relief of finally having an answer to a question I had been carrying for a long time. "My answer is yes." Arthur blinked. "Yes. Yes." A smile slowly appeared on his face. "Okay. That is all you have?" I asked. "I have been thinking about this for months." "You could have prepared something better." "I prepared a lot." I laughed. "Apparently." He shook his head, but he was smiling now. And for a while, neither of us moved. There was no need to fill the moment with anything bigger. We had already spent months building toward it without realizing what we were building. A week later, we went back to the first burger restaurant. The same place where our 3-hour dinner had made me wonder if Arthur was looking for reasons not to go home. This time, there was no excuse. No gym workout before it. No hike afterward. No accidental stop, because we happened to be nearby. It was simply a date. Arthur sat across from me, looking more relaxed than I had ever seen him. He glanced around the restaurant and smiled. I thought one workout changed everything. I looked at him. It kind of did. He reached across the table and took my hand. It was such a simple thing that I almost laughed at how much it meant. Arthur had spent months finding ways to be near me, remembering details, making time, listening to stories, showing up when I needed someone, and pretending every invitation had some ordinary explanation behind it. But sitting there, I finally understood the part one had missed. It was not the workout that changed him. It was the moment he stopped pretending I did not matter. And maybe that was why everything afterward had felt different. Arthur had not suddenly become a different person. He had simply stopped hiding where he wanted to be. With me. The following week, he still arrived at Iron Forge 5 minutes early. He still carried the same black shaker bottle. He still corrected my form when my elbows flared. But now, when he finished his workout before me, he waited by the door instead of pretending he had somewhere else to be. One morning, he looked at me and asked, "Coffee?" I smiled. "You do not need a reason?" Arthur shook his head. No, then he waited. And I realized that this was what our future was going to look like. More coffee, more hikes, more dinners, more ordinary Saturdays that would probably become memories before we noticed. No excuses required. Just Arthur asking, and me saying yes.